Well, I always forget that I'm on this. You're allowed to sit any place you want in Rossburg. Oh, don't even get me started.
The September 9th, 2024 Economic Development and Planning Committee meeting. We'll go ahead and start off with any public participation. Would anyone like to address the committee this evening? Seeing none, we'll move into approval of minutes. If you've had a chance to review the minutes, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
We'll make that motion to approve the minutes of our August the 12th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes have been adopted. We'll go ahead and move into economic development updates. First on the agenda is
Yeah, it's annexations first thing up, and I gave you a packet of information to kind of work from. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to take it home with you or to have it in front of you instead of trying to read it on the screen. The first one is what we talked about earlier. We brought it up last time. That is the annexation of the kind of the spot in the middle there off Leeds Gate. The situation is that that part is currently in the township. There's a person there at 530 who wants to build out his house. Once you build it out, then you got to combine those lots. So type 2 annexations aren't available. If you remember type 2, we don't need consent from township, but we do need to, but we share the tax revenue. So because they're going to have to combine the parcels, that's going to be a different one. That's going to be an expedited type 1 annexation is what they're trying to do. And in those situations, we have to enter into a contract with the city or with the township to reimburse them for some tax loss. That is what has been requested of us by that citizen. Typically, that number is a number that is either agreed upon, or if it is ordered by a court, there's a statutory methodology for determining what that number should be. And usually that starts with the tax value and then goes 80% at 3 years, up to year 12 at a half, 42%. Anyway, a lot of math later, that number is about $5,220. That would be, if you accepted it and the court were to order it, that's how much we would pay. So typically that's about a 6-year payoff, but I would bring to the council's attention that there's a plan to increase the value through development. So if that property value then increases, that $870 that is generated through tax revenue would be faster. This is typically for such a small dollar amount, it's something that's administrative would take care of, but because there's an annexation involved, because there's authorization through council to have the mayor in this case sign that document, it's completely a councilmatic decision. If you want to bring that in to help this citizen out who's already a citizen of the city, that is the methodology for doing that.
And then next step is what would you need from council or the committee next?
If you look at page 2 of the packet, that is a resolution which would authorize the mayor to enter into that contract for the amount that is subscribed. So if you were to pass that, if the council was to pass it, they would authorize the mayor to enter into the contract. The contract is Exhibit A to that, which is coming up after that. So if that's what you want to do, councilmatic decision, then what I would do, if that's what you'd like to do, is to pass it up to committee of the whole and to ultimately vote on authorizing the mayor to enter into that contract.
Any public hearings involved in this type of annexation?
Not this one, no.
Okay.
any questions?
No?
No. Is there any structures on that property?
Currently, no. It is a township of structure with no structures and no frontage to a road as well. So this is completely an isolated.
Right.
There's a map in there too. I think I threw there, so you can kind of see kind of where it's stuck in the middle. So it's not really an economically viable plot for anything else other than to this particular citizen.
Just the dollar amount reimbursement to the township, just to me, with no structure on there, sounds a little high, but I'm not an appraiser.
Well, currently it's $870 is what they pay a year annually to the township, What that would do is stretch that out over 12 years, paying a percentage of it. So that made it through the appraising process with Medina County. A couple of years, that's what the current value is, according to them.
But bringing it into the city, there won't be any fire levy, correct?
Bringing it into the city, it would be in the city at that
Yeah.
point, so subject to all the levies from the city. I
Yeah.
believe.
So there won't, but the township has a fire levy on their tax bill.
So I think, type 2, you end up paying 2 tax levies, one for the township, one for the city. I believe when we take it in, it would all come to the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to go ahead and move this resolution here for the, up to City Council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Second annexation is on the next page. You're going to see it says south of the airport on the top. As we're going through, as I'm going through all the parcels that are currently owned by the city, trying to understand why they are what they are, they're going to pop up a few things that don't make sense necessarily until you dig into it. The area that's highlighted in there is area that is south of the airport that is owned by the city but is in the township. The reason for that is, when we do a little history of it, is that was money that was partially approved through federal grants to purchase it, because that's the airport right north of it, which makes that unbuildable parcels underneath. So what it's currently being used for is farming. We can still rent out that farming right. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me to own property that's not in the city, especially when there's property beyond that that potentially could be developed and brought into the city, but it needs to be contiguous with the city. So by expanding that, it doesn't really do anything other than open up more land for development, if that's what's done in the future. So the suggestion I had, just like the other part, is to annex city-owned property into the city from the township.
And on here, you're looking at this, all the gray area, all the way down to, on both sides of the wall.
I gave you the black and white, but this is the
Oh, okay,
color.
okay.
So that's what it is. That's all city-owned property.
Okay, thank you.
And the farming rights are being done by the city already.
Farming rights is done by the city. That would continue.
Okay, any questions on that one?
I can make a motion to go ahead and move that resolution ordinance, sorry, hold on
Yeah, I
here.
got to prepare the ordinance on that one.
Oh, okay, move that to council as well.
For discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
The only other thing on annexation I'd bring up again is Rule 23. That rule was out there, was presented up to, go back up to council committee of the whole. There was some discussion about changing some of the verbiage. That can be done as well. Once it gets to committee of the whole, then make a motion to change whatever verbiage you'd like to change, get a second, revote it, and then it goes up for the vote. That currently is a person who's interested in bringing the annexation in. That would trigger what 23 is designed to do. So if they do come in, I will suggest that we do have that work session, start working through the issues, see if we can get something of a pre-annexation agreement involved, and start seeing what that rule would look like. So I would bring that to the attention. I probably need to start figuring out what we want to do on that.
Yeah. I guess since everyone's here, we'll open it up real quick. Any questions from the committee on Rule 23 right now?
No, I don't have
I have a
anything.
quick question.
Yeah.
I brought this to your attention several weeks ago, and why do we have to go through the amendment process then? Or why can't it be discussed tonight and taken care of before we get to meeting of the whole? Because that's where we want to do our business.
Yeah.
Well, it can on the committee level, but I don't know that anyone has an issue with that word in the language.
But that's why we do it at the committee level. That's why I'm asking.
What's that?
We do those type of things at the committee level. That's why I'm asking. Why wasn't it taken care of or brought up tonight, other than, and you can discuss it. Did any of you guys discuss it, or bring it so you can discuss it now?
Well, I just
It was
asked
the
if
word.
anyone wanted
I
to
assume they didn't
Rule
discuss it,
23.
they didn't have anything to say.
No, the motion was moved up, so that
Okay.
language has been moved up. So we can't really discuss it in emails or discussion.
Well, I
before.
didn't want it there. I wanted to do it in a committee.
Sure, and then it was moved up to committee of the whole. That's where that should be done. If they want to talk about it, certainly this committee wants to talk about it, I'm more than willing to talk about any issues you have. But there needs to be some type of motion on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to bring it up tonight, we can discuss
Yes,
it.
the wording said to consider and/or guided by. And once the word guided means to follow or to obey. And so that takes away our leeway as a council to be able to make decisions independently of what's already in the ordinance. And that takes away or limits restricts us. And so that's why I wanted that one word, if possible, struck and talked about.
Okay. If we're talking about interpretation of how those would apply, that language does not preclude you. It says shall follow. That means those are the things that you should take into account when you're voting on it. It's the way we've dealt with it legally. Maybe from other contexts or other, may...
Webster's dictionary says to obey or follow, and it says guided, and that's what guided means.
Does it say shall?
No, it doesn't say shall. It said to obey or follow.
Webster's dictionary is not what we use for legal binding, but I don't care one way or the other. That was not something that was changed from the original 23. That was already in 23, so that's nothing I changed for purposes.
And that's why I brought it to our attention, because we want the ability to have some leeway.
Clearly you do already have that leeway under the prior rule, but if you would like to make it clear, I'm all for clarity. So if that's something you want to hang up, we can make the motion.
So does striking that word change?
Let me ask you this, does it say shall be guided or should be guided?
Shall be guided, I believe.
Then change it to should be guided. At least in the planning commission, or for the zoning code, we say that the word shall means you must. The word should means you ought to think about doing it. So if that's the issue, maybe just change should be guided. But that's the whole purpose of a lot of these documents, is to provide guidance.
Right.
So if you'd like me to modify that, this committee, and obviously, I'm glad everybody's here, but this is not part of the committee meeting. But if you'd like me to modify it and make a motion,
Yeah.
I can certainly change that and send it to everybody. If that's what you're looking
Yeah, let's take a look at it, just
Okay.
take a look at changing it. So can you do that, and we can also at the same time move this forward to city council? I want to move this up for
Yeah.
council.
I will send multiple versions of it, and then you can decide which one you want to do, or I can
Okay.
make the change, and then you can do it that way.
Okay.
Good question on that. Is it a simple majority to pass the,
Yeah, that's an
Council rule.
internal, doesn't need 3 readings, and just.
No, it's just, I know, it's just, it's our council rule, but it's just a simple majority.
Yeah, it's a majority of people there, too.
Yeah.
It's not even a majority of.
Right.
Oh.
Who's
Quorum,
in
you know.
attendance and- yeah. Okay.
Okay.
One comment I would make on that topic is respectfully, usually you see the dichotomy between shall and may in the statutes, not shall and should. So may be the connotation that you want to include in any rewrite of it. So it's not usually a should or shall discussion. It's usually a shall and may discussion. Just FYI.
Okay. Yeah, I had that in others, so thanks for bringing that up, Tom. Okay, you want to move forward to general updates?
Yeah, general updates, we send out that general update, economic area plans, Ms. Anderson does all that. There was a question, I thought it was a good question, about what do some of those mean, so I want to make sure everybody knows what we know when we fill out those documents. We had a $3.5 million investment from Bueller's. Where do we get that number? We get that number from the county. Obviously, the county is the one that does, when you're pulling permits, you're going to be pulling for a commercial business out of the county. So that is what the permit was issued for from the county. We don't have a lot of information yet. We're going to follow up as to what they're doing with that money and how they're changing it, but we know they're not expanding. That would come to the city. We know they're not changing the signage. That would come to the city. So it's something internal that they're doing.
Yeah,
So
and that's the renovation that they're currently undergoing right now.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So that's just the general update from the economic set of plans.
Did you guys have a chance to review that? Any questions? or-
No.
Do we know anything about the Beef O'Brady's property down on the,
The only thing I know about it is that they filed for a liquor permit transfer into a Mexican-style restaurant. Beyond that, they haven't filed anything else that I know, Jeff.
No, I spoke to a company regarding the new signage, but she didn't disclose what the name
Yeah.
of the new business would be. But it is a restaurant of some type.
yeah? And then the other question, I guess, while we're down on that area is maybe you guys have insight, but, we had seen some emails and some comments that stuff's getting pretty beat up down there in Wadsworth Crossings. How is that regulated, or who's taking care of the roads? The landscaping looks awful, it just looks like it's turning into a place that no one's maintaining.
Yeah, that's really, it's all private property, so what we've done in the past is just, tried to reach out to the owner, or the management company, just said, you've got some issues here, you need to look into it, but.
That's kind of evolved a little bit. We don't own any of that West Reserve, what's the name of that road there?
Williams Reserve, yeah.
We don't own any of that. That is all private part of the parking lots. They have sold off portions of the parking lots. Originally, they owned all the parking for all of it. Target bought their own parking lot, so they take care of it. So the ownership of that portion is changed. It's a little bit difficult to find, but I found one number that seems to find its way to people in the know. So if there is problems, I can try to reach out.
Yeah, I think if you drive down the main roads, you notice there's problems down there. I think if this is where it could start, I think we need to make a call to them. It's just, I can go out and document it with photos, but it's
We have
looking,
those potholes there. That
yeah, it's looking pretty beat up. There's a couple places you pull out of Target there and you can't even see left or right to make a turn, and we're going to be dealing with the accident down there. So I don't know if there's something we can do. And
go up there and I'll document some of those issues, and I'll try to send them off to the one contact.
It's been a while, but we did contact them there. There were some site distance issues, and at one time they did cut things down.
Okay.
Apparently it's grown back up.
Yeah, it's
Street lights out too, and I know, as you mentioned, like when you come out of Coles and you're coming down the hill there, all the trees have grown over there. There's definitely some site issues there where you almost have to be out in the intersection, come out of Coles to see anybody coming down off the hill, just cutting them back up there, those kind of things.
So, sorry for diverting, but we were talking about,
There's some missing traffic signage too.
Yeah.
okay. Historic district classification?
Main Street and did a fabulous job finally of getting that done, and that is a classification for downtown. I don't want to steal their thunder in terms of announcing it, but it is important to know what this is not, in case people come in and there's some negative connotation out there with some other ways that they were done that are not applicable in here. So I just wanted to say that this is a downtown area. What it's not is a prevention of people, some deed restrictions, or any way preventing people from the use of their own property. This is more of a classification under this federal system for gaining access to some federal grant money, gaining access to some federal credits if you choose to, and then following some of those guidelines that they have if you choose to accept those terms and accept that money. So I just didn't want anybody to get over their skis a little bit and say, oh no, that we're going to prevent anybody from doing what they want to do with their property. That's not the case in this. We as economic development are starting to prepare the website, prepare information so that we can get that out there so people know how, if they want to be involved in that program, how they to do it and how they can start getting the money necessary to do that. So that's something we're working on in the front end.
Yeah, and again, the most important thing with that is if anybody's getting ready to do anything, please check first, because it is official now, and so if you think you may qualify for some of those tax credits, ask first. And it's the designated area will get out there too, because it's a lot like city limits going out 261. Some buildings are in, some are not, and that was all chosen by the committee, not here. So it's again, it's roughly from Boyer to Mills and Pardee to Lyman. However, there are some buildings that are not in the area too. So
Who handles the signage for that? The signs that you see that says
Not the
welcome.
city.
Usually Main Street, I believe,
Do it?
we're going to be having a meeting here today or so going over all that. So Main Street will take care, just like the Historical Society took care of their sign, St. Mark's took care of theirs. So that will fall under Main Street.
Okay. Anything? Okay, we'll go ahead and move into Zoom Prospector Engineering Analysis.
Just giving you a little bit of a heads up, and one of the services we provide and is helped through AMP is access to Zoom Prospector, Zoom Prospector is a free service that people are looking for prospective land to develop that's available, so that they're kind of a one-stop shop for them to go and look at it. So large industrial pieces, they look at Zoom Prospector to try to find something that's applicable. So we have the general one that's on the first page, is what that kind of looks like. That's what we've kind of always had. But what we've done with the help of Mr. Davis is do a little bit more, try to give enough information so people can make intelligent decisions right from the start. And so if you look at the next page on that, it talks about all the engineering requirements and and challenges that these particular parcels have, so that could save a lot of time, so that they say, well, this is great, I know exactly what I need to do, this is something that's a viable option for our business. So I just wanted to give you an example of that. It shows the maps that show all our water and our sewer maps, and it shows our zoning as to how it is. We think that's going to help people make those decisions, and the easier you make it, the more likely they are to do it. So we've been working around all our parcels in Wadsworth that are available for development, so that we can try to get that on Zoom Prospector, so we can kind of push us to the top. And people have a lot of choices they can use.
And that's no fee for the city. We provide them the information, and the people using the service are paying to use it.
Yeah, and we just provide it, so they provide additional information than what we normally give them. So we just put a little more out there.
Good.
And that's all I have for the economic development updates.
Okay, anything for Tom on that? Okay, we'll go ahead and move into building and planning updates with projects.
Actually, there's been about 8 projects that have been approved by the Planning Commission the last few weeks. In fact, 4 of them, 5 of them tonight. Salvation Army was approved on August 26th, so they will be moving on to civil plan review with the engineering department. Sheets, obviously that has been approved for some time. We're still waiting to get the plat back so that we can start gathering signatures, get that recorded. Apparently there are still a few issues between Sheets and the adjacent property owner that have not yet been worked out. So we're kind of in a holding pattern there. But I believe pretty much all of the, there's a couple engineering items that can't be resolved until they've got the okay through the owner of the legacy property. So that's still moving. Primrose School, actually they had a plat that created their lot tonight. They were part of an 11-acre parcel. They will be starting their construction though in early 2025. They're not going to start this year. Their civil plans are just about approved. I was copied on the most recent email. There's like 2 or 3 small items they need to correct, but they'll be ready to start breaking ground in 2025. Westfield Bank, this is the old, well, it's a Valley View towing site. Plans for that whole property were approved tonight. Westfield Bank will be going in along High Street frontage. Back behind it, there is a public storage facility with roughly 6,000 square feet, is that right, of retail along its east wall. Will be going in behind that, and it'll be connected by an internal road network between High Street and Smoke Rise Drive. Those were approved through Planning Commission tonight. Yoder Graphics and MPI Labels, 2 existing businesses here in town, had additions approved through the Planning Commission this evening. That brings us where to item G, Powell Gymnasium. Yeah, there is a private recreational facility that's going in at 579 Corporate Parkway. That will be moving on, again, through Planning Commission. The approval was given tonight. They'll be moving on to civil plan review. I'm not sure, well, I think there is one more vacant site left on Corporate Parkway after this. So, so that has, actually there's been more activity in the last 2 years out on Corporate Parkway than there have been previous 10 to 15. And then also a new business. This is on, I'm trying to think, the flare plant or the, what was it? On 323 Grandview, multi-use facility. Again, more storage suites, but they're more geared towards contractors' equipment, okay, not private materials. Their site plan was approved by Planning Commission this afternoon. Two-phase project, up to 5 buildings, but they're geared more towards contractors who have heavy equipment or pieces of construction equipment that they need to keep indoors. And so it's really more of a contractor storage yard, although everything will be kept indoors. So those are some of the activities that have been keeping me busy lately.
Okay, any questions?
I want to clarify, where Westfield Bank, is that going to be where Clark's Corners, the tire truck plate repair, is that also included in that property, in that area?
No, it is not.
I don't
It's
think
not?
so.
Okay. And half that building is falling down and unoccupied, and as a commercial building, what processes do we do to make sure that that's safe, and as well as it's for economic development, to keeping the appearances of the town up?
I'll have to look into it. I'm not aware of
Yeah, there's holes in the roof and windows are broken
which
out.
parcel. Is this north of the bank side or south?
The old A-bar section of it.
Yeah.
The old Atomic.
Yeah, the
Oh,
atomic
the
bar.
Atomic?
Okay, it's over there in the corner with
Those windows are all broken out.
Broken
The
out,
roof's
there's a hole
falling
in the roof.
I thought that was demoed some time ago, but it was apparently another building.
There's a code enforcement aspect of that, so once we get a complaint in, we'll file the code enforcement to have somebody go check it out, and then citations can be issued therefrom. So let's put it on our radar, and then we'll go check it out and see if we can figure out if citations need to be issued.
And then you said with private property, we're very limited, because there's an abandoned house with windows broken out and just west of the circle.
801 Seville, yes.
Yeah.
I'll be in touch with them, but they have 2 choices. They can board it up, or they can tear it down. But I'm going to try and, before sending out a formal letter, I'm going to try and contact the company that owns them, their property manager, and just say, hey, you got some issues, here are your options.
Yeah, we could have people living in that house and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to proposed zoning text amendment.
Okay, the riparian zone setbacks that we've discussed, they have been through Planning Commission. They recommended approval. So it's really, the ball is now back in your court, and I believe a public hearing has been set or should be scheduled before you adopt those regulations.
Correct. Yeah, we talked about that the other night.
I had the reading on it the other night and said that.
So other than that, Planning Commission has no issues with it, and again, I think it should, it's going to be a market improvement, I believe. So it's going to be easier, not only for the city to enforce and understand, but also applicants too.
For the committee's knowledge, I believe Law Director Proudfoot weighed in this afternoon indicating that Ms. Darlington could set the public hearing, but it has to be 30 days out. So
Correct.
the public hearing does not need to be set at a public meeting, so I think she's able to set that hearing. We'll just have to wait and read the current legislation a couple times until we
To
get
get
to that
there.
public hearing date.
Okay.
Okay, infrastructure improvements, proposed chapter 157.
Okay, that's me. You may get used to me, and I like to use word pictures and visual things to remind people of things. So, as you may recall, we have this scraping off the old stickers. And so, last month I was here with the riparian information, and so this particular message, we're going to really be talking about taking most of these stickers off with this infrastructure improvements chapter. So it's making pretty good progress as we go. You may recall that initially I brought to you some principles that we're going by, that being clarity, sensibility, and proportionality. And those principles are being employed as we're doing these updates. And so I'll kind of point out how those are being implemented as we go. And then you may recall this slide. This is my kind of picture on how we're trying to stay balanced when it comes to not being too lenient and putting too much effort, imposing too much stress on the community, and not being too strict, but trying to be balanced. And so that I'm going to use that Goldilocks image here, kind of, and talk about when things come up with balance and how we're doing that in this particular in this chapter. I'm I'm gonna actually remind you with this picture, just to kind of keep you engaged to that topic. So to recap, real quick, the current infrastructure regulations are strewn throughout a bunch of chapters. So we're going to take those kind of vague standards for the most part and move them into a whole new chapter. And I've shown you this list before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these just one at a time. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting and fast. So I'm an engineer, so give me a break. Okay, so first, just general provisions. Last month I came to you kind of to explain the permit process. That's really what's here. I won't go into much more detail than that. The next chapter is street improvements, and what it has in there is it has standard right-of-way widths, road widths, things like that. How many parking lanes we want based on different kinds of streets. MA local is what is it called? Marginal access local.
Yeah.
Is the term for MA local, just didn't fit on the slide. So simple details like that is part of what's in that chapter in places now. Also what's called alternative street standards. And I point this out because this has come up somewhat recently when it comes to private streets. So in the past, the street standards were pretty firm, and if you wanted to do a public street, you had to do it a certain way. You want to vary from that, do a private street. And so we have a lot of private streets, and you may have heard recently that I don't like my private streets anymore because they cost a lot of money to maintain. So this does provide for flexibility. So if you want to do something creative, there are mechanisms in the code to do it more than just the one way. So that's really what that's here for. And then next, the transportation analysis is in this section, is currently in the zoning code. So we're moving that into this chapter. So providing some triggers as to what requires a transportation impact analysis. And the goal is to require it less often, to have more catastrophic projects that need to do it. And part of why we can do that is in my next presentation with impact fees. The impact fees can take those incremental impacts and just take them that way and not have to do a study and pay so many consultants for so much analysis. Let's use those funds to actually build things, not just to pay people to think about things. And so let's tie this chapter then just to show you how we're using those implementing those principles. So we have clarity in the right-of-way, road widths, and paving. We have sensibility in having some creative standards when it comes to how to do public streets in a little more creative way. And we have proportionality when it comes to doing transportation analyses that fit the size of the project and the street that's in it. So you can see how we're using those principles throughout the code to help add those elements. I won't go through that for everything, but just to give you a picture of how that looks. So now for section 300, this is an issue of balance, because subsidy is a big part. This is conditions of development for streets. So what do the developers need to construct or dedicate when it comes to street issues? So it's very important to be aware of the balance questions in this section. So there's right-of-way dedication. We're proposing in the code that right-of-way is required for all developments. So what that means is for major streets, there's an additional width, as I showed on that earlier slide. And if you're lacking that right-of-way, we need to dedicate right-of-way to allow room for that future fully built street. So that's the typical requirement. But then there's exceptions for small projects. So if it's a small project with low impact, then it's not for every project. It has a proportionality sense to it. Same thing when it comes to streetscape improvements. So streetscape is sidewalks, street trees, and generally streetlights. So those are more or less required today, but it's not real clear as to what the triggers are. So the trigger being all developments along their frontage need to do a streetscape improvement. But in the same way, there's some exemptions for small building expansions and things that are of limited impact. So again, you see that clarity to make sure that the thresholds are clear, but then exceptions for the small things that give that flexibility. And then lastly, one thing that's kind of a new thought in streetscape is that of this fee in lieu. And so often with sidewalks particularly, they're not connecting to anything in either direction. So to build a sidewalk in the middle of nowhere, the classic example is on Akron Road with Leedscape. There's a nice new sidewalk sitting way back from the street that connects nowhere on, I think, like a quarter mile on either side. And so in those cases, then don't build it, just give us a fee in lieu improvements. We'll take those funds and go build sidewalks that are helpful in other places. That's really the intent, to have that flexibility that we think would be helpful. Okay, and then moving on to section 400, access management. Access management is really just driveway access. And I'm not going to go into these details, but this is just taking traffic engineering principles and putting them in a regulation so that we can be a little more consistent about how we deal with that. The next issue is stormwater, and this is actually, strangely enough, this is actually the area where we've gotten the most frustrations between staff and the private sector when it comes to these stormwater issues. And so this is an issue of it's kind of important and somewhat nuanced. And I've brought an example up in the past. I'm going to bring it up again just since you've seen it before to illustrate the kind of struggles we have for balance here. So you may have seen this project in the past. There's a small addition that's shown in red, and there's a photo looking at the parking lot from the street. And the proposal was to tear out that landscaping and put in some stormwater facilities. And so we want to talk about what some sensible options, and I've talked about this before here. So we brought three sensible solutions. One of them is modify the existing detention basin that's there. Let's not tear out the landscaping. Is one sensible solution. Another one is to don't worry about the detention, anything, just pay a fee in lieu, and just discharge to that existing detention basin, and don't worry about your stormwater quality or detention. And the third option is one of just exempting, just saying it's below a threshold, nothing's required. So what we're proposing in this particular code section is this balanced approach, we think, of saying if we exempt it entirely, there's an incremental impact over time of these projects that will cause problems. But by being too strict, you end up having to spend money on really ineffective improvements. And so this balanced approach saying, if it's not effective, go ahead and just pay this fee in lieu, and then that way you will mitigate the impact, but not be really having to spend a lot of money on something that's not helpful. Okay, and then we're almost done. I told you, this was exciting. Water and wastewater systems. We're not going to go much into detail, but the idea that do you have an adequate system on your property to serve you, and do you need to construct anything off-site or oversized, things like that. That's something that comes up that's pretty customary. And then the last part is reimbursement districts is the last section, and I wanted to not get into too much detail, but explain why would you do a reimbursement district, because I'll be talking about this with impact fees. The idea that there's infrastructure funding is a big factor in these projects. So when would this apply? Well, if you have a developer who builds infrastructure that serves the surrounding area, so they're building something that benefits more than just themselves. And then not only that, but there's not enough resources to pay for those improvements through all the other mechanisms you might have. So there's a need for that funding. And so the simple idea is then that if we have an area that's benefited and we don't have enough funding, we can collect from those people who benefit from it and pay back that developer who provided that infrastructure. And I have a very brief example here. This is an actual real-life property here shown in purple. It has been in here several times apparently for development and has not been successful in developing. One of the big reasons is that a long sewer main is needed along Leatherman in order to provide ultimate service to this site. And so one of the limitations of today's regulation is there's these assessments that we can do, and that's in the code today. But those assessments are really limited to just that narrow frontage of people who directly connect. And it's not really cost effective when it comes to a pretty big, expensive improvement like this that's regional. So the reimbursement district process then allows you to look at, this is in orange, the actual service area of that pipe, and you actually have a lot more benefited area, a lot more people who then could not have developed without the sewer installed. Therefore, it's appropriate that they would be contributing to some of that cost. And it just gives you more flexibility to cover some of those, and make some of those properties developable that may have not been developed in the past. So that's it. I wanted just to say what we're recommending is to take this this code, distribute it to stakeholders in the community, let them take a look at it, poke holes in it, make sure that we have everything solid. And if there's things we want to change, we can make those adjustments, and then come back here next month with that final version, and then hopefully move it to adoption. So that's all I have for that. Open for any questions if you have.
I just wanted to ask a simple thing here. You had touched on the private streets that were a lot to maintain, and you had mentioned there would be some possible working with the city. Did I misinterpret that?
There have been some recent events where neighbors, I've heard neighbors who have private streets, neighborhood associations who need to pay for
The
upgrades,
maintenance.
and they're frustrated because they didn't want to have to pay for that. And what I'm getting at is that you can write regulations that make it easier to do public streets.
Okay.
Because in the past, there was kind of two paths. There was a perfect street, or anything less than perfect had to be private.
Okay.
And so this allows for some flexibility. So you wouldn't always have to do private when you're being creative.
Doesn't necessarily fix the old problems, this is going forward.
Forward, okay, okay.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. All needed improvements.
Love your enthusiasm.
Yeah,
Okay, any other questions?
very good.
No,
Thank you.
no, thank you.
Okay, you probably want to roll right into Chapter 158.
Well, hold on. Define it. Okay. So, different format, looks different. Right? Okay, so now you may recall, so for word pictures, remember the take a penny, give a penny jar. So the idea with this, I've used this before to kind of give a picture for, this isn't a tax that we're taking from people and keeping. This is something that's a resource. And so just to be clear, apart from the cute little clip art situation, let me explain just briefly. So what the idea of that take a penny, give it a penny, is the developer one comes in and they pay an impact fee. And then when the developer two comes in and builds this major infrastructure system like we just saw on the screen here for the reimbursement district, so that when that major infrastructure is constructed, then they have that ability to receive reimbursement through those same fees. Very simple. So what's paid by developers is reimbursed to developers. That's what I mean by that give a penny, take a penny process. So in using that image, but what I realized as I'm preparing tonight's presentation is, in the question of why collect these fees, that image didn't quite work. So I have a new one, and bear with me. And it's the coffee fund. So the idea being that in the office, everyone puts in a couple pennies or dollars into the coffee jar to take their cups of coffee. At some point, the coffee pot is empty. And so if we don't have enough money in the fund to pay for the new cup of coffee, that's a problem. And so that's really what impact fees do. And that's just the picture, I think, that makes a better image as to a big reason why we collect them. So with that image, let's kind of go and look at this other example I used before with the fish ladder. See the little images that kind of helpful? And I think they're fun. So we had this illustration of this signal that was needed after this 10,000 trips, and this poor fish who has to get over this fish ladder, the traffic signal. And so you think about the cups of coffee. So the first project comes along, and they take the first cup of coffee. And so the impact fee allows the users to take a proportional share of that cost and have it available to then apply to that signal later. So the next project comes along and takes a big thermos of coffee, and so as that coffee is depleted, we have enough money so that once you get to that, when the final drops are left in the coffee pot, there's funds available to then fill that pot. And that's really what this is it looks at, as those projects come along, it gives you the funding we need to get the infrastructure built. Because what happens in real life is the signal never gets built. It moves along and it stops. And so this makes it so you get over the dam, you get the infrastructure completed, and you then mitigate the impacts that are needed to be mitigated. So that's just the image that I was hoping to kind of convey with this system. So why flood to impact fees? Well, the main reason is one of this being catalysts. This is actually a scientific graph of what catalysts do. I'm told that a catalytic converter is a catalyst. It helps to dissipate the toxic gases from the car exhaust. It makes it dissipate faster. And then in the image of development, then what does impact fees do? Well, the impediments make projects sometimes unaffordable. And so by you pull those impediments down by having these impact fees as a source of revenue or reimbursement toward developers who build these improvements. But that's not the only method we have the only catalyst we have. And so there's a whole package of catalysts that I want to make sure you're aware of to see this impact fees is just one of many tools. So reimbursement districts we just talked about is another tool. There's an impediment because there's a big cost of infrastructure, and how do we reimburse the developer for those major costs? Reimbursement districts is one more catalyst. Even state and federal grants would be an option. There's grant money available often to make improvements that are water, sewers, transportation. Each one has its own subtleties, but those are, again, other catalysts to help developments happen. And then the last idea is tax increment financing. The first three are developer funded or state funded. The tax increment financing is a little different because you're borrowing against future tax revenues for the current development. So they're all a little bit different. They have pluses and minuses. Tax increment financing would be better for a really large project with a lot of infrastructure, where maybe the impact fees are good for a small one that is it's much more cost effective. So each one has its pluses and minuses. But they're all there. They're all part of that package. All help to remove those impediments to make those projects more likely, because we're trying to open up more land for development to make more developments more full. So impact fees are what we're here for tonight, so I'm not going to talk about those other items, just wanted to kind of get you a little bit of background. One of the other reasons to do impact fees is what I'm saying is it reduces cost variability. When it comes to development, so many of the costs have to do with bringing infrastructure to a site. And so that varies quite a bit. And some sites are lucky, they have all the infrastructure right there. Some of them are less fortunate and have to put a lot of money out for that. So the impact fees then really kind of level that playing field and try to make it more consistent among all the projects that you're doing. And so back to my coffee fund. So in the sense of coffee fund, then really the low-end projects are the ones that happen the most often, and they really use up that infrastructure's capacity that's available. And so those low-end ones, when they use up all that capacity with the cheap projects, they exhaust whatever is available, and so that way when you get to the higher-end projects, the coffee pot's empty. And so what ends up happening is those more expensive sites just stay vacant. And a lot of times that means that the infrastructure doesn't get built. And so we have these incremental impacts that happen without that ability to make those mitigating improvements. So it makes those higher end projects cheaper, makes the little lower end projects to pay a little more of their coffee as they take it out, and make that more balanced. And then the last thing is, again, the impact fees minimize these community impacts, because we're able to make those improvements. Those often, like I said, there's a project in town that you may be aware of, that there was multiple phases, and at the last phase they had to build a traffic turn lane. And they built out to the point where they did all the project until they got to the turn lane requirement and stopped. And I believe it sat vacant for quite a few years. So the turn lane never got built. So to get those turn lanes built, signals built, all those improvements done, the impact fees help. So one of the main questions then is developer pays impact fees. How much are they? How much are those fees? I'm not going to go into great detail today, but just as an illustration, what we're proposing right now on the chart for single-family dwelling today, the impact fees are $2,650. What we're proposing is to increase those to $6,400. We're creating a transportation fee. We're adding to the water fee, and we're making a small adjustment to the sewer, keeping parks the same. So that's a simplistic proposal of what we're talking about for the fee structure. And I'll kind of get into how you can see how that impacts a project here in just a minute. But the way it works is they're collected citywide, and then the transportation projects pay for transportation, transportation fees pay for transportation, water fees pay for water, sewer pays for sewer. They're used for the infrastructure needed to serve properties within their category. So now, as those come in, the infrastructure is then, as developers build infrastructure, it's paid back as we talked about. So let's go through the real example now. Mountain Eaton Phase 1, those are, I'm assuming you know, it's way well out south off of Mountain Eaton. So their application materials showed that their total cost of infrastructure to serve that site was $2.7 million plus. That's what they paid the FetchGo to install all the infrastructure needed to get the ready for housing. This is not housing costs. This is just the infrastructure cost. So add on then the current impact fees is now, which was the $125,000 rounded off. So the total cost of that project when it comes to infrastructure, including impact fees, was just under $2.9 million. So you can see that's was today. What we're proposing is to increase that $2,650 to $6,400. So you can see that that makes a change of just slightly under $200,000 for that particular project. But one thing I want to point out is that this project paid for a water main, a large water main in the front of the property. And so that cost then is reduced. So whatever they would have paid in those impact fees, they would get back toward the cost of that water main. Therefore, their old total cost of this real project is over $2.9 million. So it's more, but not really, maybe just a few percentages more. Not a big difference. And therefore, that's just a very quick illustration of how these will work. So what I'm proposing now for next steps, just like we talked about, I was proposing that we would take this language of this code and the fee structure and take it to the development stakeholders who do this for a living to get their feedback as to what they think this might work. Then we'll come back, just like with the other proposal, come back here with any changes, feedback, decisions to make, and then with that we'll take it to council for adoption if that's what you would want to do. So that is, that's all I have.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
That one's a little harder to understand.
It was easier.
Yeah.
Good job, Mr. Davis.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good to me. Okay, we'll go ahead and move into other business. I think Tom wanted to mention something on the.
I think unless you got any, did you get anything from Denise on the CHIP grants? I have a few numbers here that there's 19 CHIP grants applications throughout the county. They are taking applications, but they're all just backups right now. The money, the money has all been dispersed, and if all those projects go through, the money will have all been spent. And some of those, they're still doing the investigative on whether they do the complete rehab or the partial on those. But they're not discouraging anyone from making applications, but right now you're in a holding pattern if you do.
That's the last I'd heard. is
Okay,
that,
yep.
Right now, they've gotten enough applications, they believe, but now the next step, they got to go through and make
Correct.
sure that the actual applicants meet the requirements. There's no project that's a walk away because it needs too much done. So they're still sorting all of that out. But I don't yet have a report of how many of those actual applications
Wadsworth,
are
yeah.
Wadsworth
Yeah.
city addresses.
Yeah, she didn't have those in front of her, and
Right.
but in
Yeah.
general, though, you can still apply, but you're in a holding pattern right now
Correct.
on that.
And that's what we've done in previous years.
Yep, okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Yep.
Okay, if not, our next scheduled meeting is October 14th at 5 PM here in council chambers, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
We are adjourned.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.